It is not your imagination. Cruise port stops have gotten shorter, it is getting worse, and that is costing you money. On a recent Mediterranean cruise, it felt like we were racing from landmark to landmark, then racing back to the ship. It would head to the next port, and we'd do it all again the next day. It was pretty exhausting, actually. When you compare itineraries from 10 years ago, many popular ports now show arrivals that are an hour later or departures that are an hour earlier. A full day in port usually means just 8 to 10 hours total. And that's before you factor in tendering, lines to get off the ship, transportation to excursions, and those early back on board calls. Once you add it all up, you may only get 5 or 6 true hours of sightseeing. And you can probably already guess why. It's mostly about money and squeezing as much out of you as possible. To be fair, running a cruise line is expensive and fuel is one of the biggest costs. Moving ships that weigh hundreds of tons is not cheap, so the slower they sail, the more fuel they save. But that fuel efficiency often comes at the expense of your time in port. But that's not the only reason. More and bigger ships have led to growing port congestion. In popular destinations like Barcelona, Cozumel, Nassau, there may be 5 or 6 ships scheduled on the same day. With limited dock space, each ship is assigned a strict arrival and departure window. Local restrictions and tides can also play a big role, and in some countries, every passenger has to be cleared by customs. That adds another layer of delay and cuts down on your usable port time. But here's the part most vacationers never really think about. Shorter port days are good for business. I mean, really good. Cruise lines make a huge portion of their profits while you're on board, not when you're out exploring. And short port days are padding their bottom line a lot. Back in 2016, Royal Caribbean reported that about 28% of its total revenue came from onboard and other sources. Basically, everything on top of your ticket price. By 2024, that number had climbed to as much as 38%, depending on the ship and the season. That means the amount each passenger spends on board has increased dramatically, from about $70 a day in 2019 to more than $90 a day 5 years later. Royal Caribbean even credited what the company calls continued strength in onboard revenue as one of the biggest drivers of their record profits. So when you think about it, keeping passengers on the ship a little longer and in port a little less is a smart financial move. Let's put some numbers behind this. According to Cruise Market Watch, the average cruiser spends about $697 on extras during a single sailing. That's on top of a base ticket price of about $1,457. Here's how that spending typically breaks down. About $338 goes to casinos and bars, $139 to shore excursions, $70 to spa and salon services, and another $105 on photos, shops, and miscellaneous onboard purchases. That means nearly 40% of what you spend happens after you've boarded the ship. So when you see a port day that's only 6 or 7 hours long, that's not a coincidence, it's part of the business model. Every hour you're on board is an hour the cruise line can make money. And that's where private islands come in. Cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, Carnival, and Norwegian have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into their own private islands. You've heard of them, places like Perfect Day at CocoCay, Harvest Caye, and Half Moon Caye. They're beautiful, convenient, and completely controlled by the cruise line. Every dollar you spend there, from the zip line to the water park to the beach cabana to your bar tab, stays in the company's pocket. So the more your itinerary shifts toward private islands and shorter port stops, the more you're inside what I call the cruise line bubble, where everything is curated, convenient, and very profitable. It's not necessarily a bad experience. In fact, many cruisers love the private islands, but it is a very different experience than wandering the canals in Amsterdam or grabbing a gelato in Florence. If you're frustrated by short port days on the big ships, there is an alternative, but it too comes at a price. Smaller ship lines, you've heard these names, Azamara, Oceania, Silversea, they specialize in longer stays in port, evenings ashore, and sometimes true overnights. Their itineraries are built around immersion rather than entertainment. The trade-off is that these cruises usually cost significantly more per day than the big ship mainstream lines. You're paying for a more exclusive experience, fewer passengers, higher service levels, and far more time to explore each destination. So yes, that extra time in port generally does come at a cost, but if you value immersion over onboard amusement parks, that premium might be worth every penny. If that's not in your budget, or you really enjoy the big ship experience, here's a good game plan. First, check your itinerary carefully. A 7-day cruise might only include 4 or 5 ports, and each one may only offer a handful of hours ashore. Remember that those arrival and departure times don't really give you a realistic view of how much usable time you'll have in port. Second, look for overnights or extended stays. Some mainstream lines are starting to add the occasional late departure. Third, make the most of whatever time you have. Choose excursions that stay close to port or explore on your own to skip the long bus rides. If you're comfortable doing DIY sightseeing, you'll squeeze every minute out of your visit. Just keep a close eye on the clock. You don't want to be one of those people we've all seen racing down the pier as your cruise ship sails away. That will cost you even more. If you want to save some money while you're on your cruise, be sure to check out this video with some fantastic parking hacks, and this video will help you choose the best itinerary. I'm Patrick, your Port Authority.